All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the final event in our Anatomy of War series. Very glad to see a full house for Professor Howard Zinn today. This week we've spent looking at the War on Terror. For those of you who are maybe 17 to the 22-year-old range, this is the 7th year of the War on Terror. Which is why we chose this week to do this series. The Anatomy of War series was intended to be a very broad-based look at the war, not just the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, but the entire War on Terror starting on September 11th on. Events included Lorna Tykastoop, who is an independent journalist who spends 2 to 3 months out of the year living in Iraq, outside of the green zone, not embedded, but living with Iraqi families, and just getting to live with them and experience what they're experiencing. She writes for a magazine and is the chief editor for Chronogram, which is a newsprint magazine out of New York City, which is also available online. And an amazing storyteller. Her perspective was amazing. We've had Douglas Feith here on Tuesday. He was the Undersecretary of Defense, worked for Donald Rumsfeld from 2001 to 2005. He wrote a book on those experiences called War and Decision, and he spoke on Tuesday at St. Cajetan's and offered his perspective, obviously being a proponent of the War on Terror and one of the primary crafters of our foreign policy. So that was actually a very interesting experience. I personally have never been run off of a campus or out of a venue before, but we were that day. It was very exciting. Today we have Professor Howard Zinn to offer his perspectives on civil disobedience. And I'm not going to get too much into his biography. I would like to introduce Charles Angeletti to introduce Professor Zinn. But just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Please take this moment to turn off your cell phones. It's just this moment. Off the cell phones. And also, we are selling Professor Zinn's books in the back of the house, and he will be signing books over to the left of the doors at the end of the event. We are on a very tight schedule, though, so when we get to the Q&A section of the afternoon, please, please, please keep your questions short so everybody has an opportunity to get up to the mic. That being said, Charles Angeletti.
It's really an honor to introduce someone who's been one of my heroes, and even though I never took a class from him, one of my mentors throughout my career. In 1980, Howard Zinn published People's History of the United States. Since then, it has sold almost 2 million copies, but it was never reviewed in a major historical journal. I don't know of anybody who's more appropriate for Metropolitan State College of Denver than Howard Zinn. We started off as a people's college. We are now supposed to become a preeminent college, and I find no conflict between being preeminent and being a people's college. So yes, I hear you. I just want to say one thing. I don't know of anybody who has influenced how we look at our country and how we look at our lives more than Howard Zinn. If your turkey tastes different Thanksgiving, then it's probably because of Howard Zinn. If Columbus Day doesn't mean as much to you as it once did, or it means something different, it's because of Howard Zinn. If you teach the Civil War or take the Civil War and it's different than what you got in high school or at a younger age, it's because of Howard Zinn. He has done much to change the thinking of the way we view the world and the way we view particularly this country. And it's my privilege and my pleasure and my great honor to introduce to you Howard Zinn.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I just looked at the poster and noticed that I'm going to speak on civil disobedience. And my first act of civil disobedience will be to ignore what the poster said. No, I will. Civil disobedience inevitably will come into my talk because it inevitably comes into all of my talks. But I actually, I was looking at, the overall theme of this gathering, the gatherings you've had here, the anatomy of war. So I thought, yes, that's what I would talk about. I talk about war, and when you talk about war, you have to talk about civil disobedience, because the only way you get out of war is by civil disobedience. I say this to those people here who want to get out of war, and so to think about what you might do next. Make your plans for tomorrow. I don't want to say a lot about the present war in Iraq. The reason I don't want to say a lot about the present war in Iraq, I assume that everybody knows it's a disaster, that everybody knows it's one of the most stupid wars we've ever engaged in, and we've engaged in a number of them. It's a disaster not because we're losing. I mean, what if we were winning? What would that mean? If people talk about winning and losing, you don't win in wars. You don't win in wars. That's a very important thing to keep in mind. So when I hear McCain talk about, we're going to win, I want us to win in Iraq. And frankly, when I hear Obama talk about we're not going to, we don't have to win in Iraq, we have to win in Afghanistan. Please. No, we don't want to win. We don't belong there. No, just a very simple moral point before you get into the specifics, of exactly what's happening there and so on and what should we do and so on. A sort of basic moral statement. We do not belong in Iraq. We do not belong in Afghanistan. Our troops do not belong in any place in the world where people do not want us and where we are doing harm. It's as simple as that. You see, we have destroyed Iraq. I know you say, Saddam Hussein, look what he did to Iraq. I'm not going to say anything positive about Saddam Hussein. No. And Saddam Hussein was a tyrant and brutal and so on. But the fact is, we have ruined Iraq beyond what Saddam Hussein was capable of, really. Beyond. And the people of Iraq, they do not have clean water. We have driven 2 million people out of their homes in that country. 2 million people as a result of what we've done. There were exiles and people who escaped Iraq under Saddam Hussein, but nothing like this. We've devastated that country. Best thing we can do is get out as fast as we can. I know there are people who say, we mustn't get out, it will be terrible. It's terrible now. We must get out because there'll be civil war. There is civil war. In Vietnam, I must tell you this, I wrote a book in 1967. We who write books love to talk about the books we wrote. I wrote a book early in the Vietnam War, first couple of years of the escalation of the war. I wrote a book called Vietnam, The Logic of Withdrawal. Mine was the first book, actually, to call for withdrawal from Vietnam. And the people, there were responses, and people said, we can't withdraw. There'll be a bloodbath. And so we stayed for 5 more years. And in those 5 years, another 35,000 Americans were killed, and another 1 million Vietnamese were killed, and then in the end we withdrew. And there was no bloodbath. I say this because, people scare you into sticking with a terrible situation by telling you, if you don't stick with a terrible situation, there'll be a more terrible situation. It's a very common thing to do. We must bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We must kill several 100,000 innocent people in Japan, because if we don't, something more terrible will happen. Well, actually, just from a factual, historical point of view, all those things